as I said, my name is Deanna O'Connor. I'm a business journalist and I run the Speak Up Club, which was originally set up to do public speaking training for women in business to empower them in business and as leaders, just in business and the community as well. So we usually do very interactive workshops. I'm not going to do that today. I'm going to run through the webinar and then I'll be happy to hang on as long as anybody wants if they have questions afterwards. So first of all, I'm just going to run through with you what we will be doing today. I'm going to firstly discuss how to introduce yourself effectively and hopefully better than I did there, making a mess of my screen sharing. Then I'm going to go through a little bit about the physical symptoms we feel about fear and anxiety. A few little quick techniques you can use before a meeting to calm yourself, make yourself feel a little bit more powerful and kind of a greater impact when you go into that meeting. Then a few little things about the nonverbal cues which can impact our presence so that you can just see how maybe you don't know how other people are perceiving you. But if you're spending a lot of time on Zoom lately and you've been kind of checking yourself out in your little screen at the side, you might be noticing more about how you're coming across. Then another thing that I want to do with you today, and I found in workshops that this is the one thing that comes up again and again and again, is that people sit there going, oh my God, I'm dreading it being my turn to talk. And they're just like rehearsing in their head what they have to say. And then they hate it when they have to say their bit. So we're going to talk about ways you can kind of practice getting more comfortable with thinking on your feet. And then finally, hopefully we have time for a very powerful thing, which is a system for getting what you want at meetings, which I'm sure is what everybody really wants to know, but I'm going to leave the best bit till last. So first of all, for introducing yourself, and this can apply whether it's in real life meetings or on Zoom. We all tend to talk fast, and I'm I'm guilty of it myself as well sometimes. So when I'm kind of public speaking, training and coaching, one thing I would always say to people is that never be afraid of a pause, because a lot of the most powerful speakers in the world use pauses very effectively. If you want proof of this, just Google Barack Obama, and half of most of his speeches are pauses. He really lets the words land. So a good way to introduce yourself to other people is to visualize this method. It's the two hands method. And you imagine you're holding your first name and your second name in each hand. And as you're introducing yourself to the person, say, hi, my name is Deanna O'Connor. And that really slow giving the information out. So you're really giving the information to the person, leaving a little beat between the two names. It gives them a chance to mentally process what your name is. And personally, I have an unusual name that people don't really get the pronunciation. So if I go, hi, my name is Deanna O'Connor, really quickly, they don't have time to get my name. And even if your name is Anne Smith, or a really simple name to remember, people need that little beat to kind of mentally process it, take the information in, and then they can remember it, hopefully, because all of us have trouble remembering names. So it's really good, anything you're doing, just to kind of try and slow it down. And that's a really good little tip for just introducing yourself effectively. The next thing I want to talk to you about is where your fear and anxiety is coming from. And if anybody kind of wants to go into the chat box and let me know anything that you want me to talk about later, particular symptoms of fear you have or particular situations that do give you anxiety before meetings, if you want to type it in now, and then at the end of the questions we can have a look at that. So just typical examples of what you might feel when you're feeling nervous about a meeting is dry mouth, shortness of breath, sweaty palms, all of these things. I found years ago in a work-related setting, I just felt nauseous the whole time. The thought of going to work in the morning, driving there, I'd feel nauseous. So any of these kind of things are little messages that your body is sending you. But the good thing is that they're all controlled by the amygdala in the brain, which is responsible for your fight or flight response. And a really good way of thinking about this is that, you know, hundreds, thousands of years ago, when people were hunter-gatherers and they're living in the plains and they see a lion, they know to be scared. So they know to run. But now we still have that ancient brain that hasn't really evolved at the same pace that modern life has. So we're still having these responses in response to a perceived threat. So a meeting that's going to be tough, or a nasty boss, or just having to say your piece when you're a bit nervous about it can be the perceived threat that you're worried about. However, the good thing about our brains is that they can kind of argue with ourselves. So our emotional brain and our thinking brain can have a little conversation. So if you see a lion in a zoo, your thinking brain is telling your emotional brain, don't be scared, there's bars there and it can't get you and eat you. So if you see a lion in the wild, perhaps you're a little bit more scared because you know you're in more real danger. So once we can recognize where fears are coming from, our thinking brain can have a little chat with our emotional brain and tell us to calm down, which is why it's really powerful to learn about where those fears are coming from and little techniques that you can use to kind of override them. So I read this and I think it's a really good way of putting it. And I knew I wouldn't remember all the science words. So I think if you just want to have a little read there as well, that the fear reaction is coming from the hippocampus and the frontal cortex are processing the contextual information. So when you see it in the zoo, those parts of your brain are dampening down the fear response. And then your brain can just go, okay, we can get on with this. And likewise, if you're in a meeting and you know how to calm yourself down and how to remind yourself that it's okay, your boss is not a lion that's going to rip your head off, literally, you can start to calm yourself down as well. So there's a few quick little ways to calm that I find really, really effective. And these can be even just at the end of the day to use some of them to calm you down. But one of the best ones, I think, is this candle visualization, which candles are really calming anyway. We all think of like lovely, dreamy spa candles with relaxing scent, but we don't necessarily have candles in work, probably because of fire regulations. So we have an imaginary candle, which is our finger. And you're very welcome to do this along with me if you want to try it out as well at the same time. So the candle visualization is going to do three things. It's going to make you focus. So you put your arm out about arm's length ahead of you, and you're pretending that your finger is a candle. So the first thing it's going to do, it's going to focus your attention. So you're going to be gazing at your finger, and that's going to stop you thinking about all the other things that you're worried about that are freaking you out, and your little monkey brain going about all those things that are on your mind. So you focus your attention on that imaginary candle. Secondly, it's a candle instantly. If your powers of imagination are good, it's relaxing. The next thing we're going to do is pretend that the candle is lighting, and say your nail is like a little flame. So you want to blow around the candle, but you don't want to blow it out. So what that's going to do is start you controlling your breathing. And your breathing is the key to calming everything down. All that fight or flight response, all that crazy brain going. As anyone who does meditation will know, it can be really, really powerful in affecting your thought processes and your calm. So once you start looking at your finger, imagining that you're doing a very gentle breath around it, you're doing a calming meditation as such. But the third powerful thing here is that if you're trying to blow around the finger and you're really trying not to blow out that flame, you don't want to do a puff. You want to do a, you can almost feel your breath go around your finger. That is a very controlled breath. So that's what we would call diaphragmatic breathing, which I don't have time to go into here today, but it is the proper way to breathe for any kind of acting or public speaking. Now, actually sitting down, I've noticed doing a lot of webinars isn't ideal for doing this. So if you're going to practice diaphragmatic breathing yourself, I would recommend either standing up, or some people like to lie down to do it. But you'll know when you're doing it because your diaphragm, which is just under your rib cage, is a big muscle, and it's usually in a kind of frown shape. But when you breathe in really deeply into your diaphragm, it's like turning that frown upside down, and it turns into a smiley shape. So then you push up from the diaphragm, really controlled, because it's a muscle and you can train it to be even more controlled, and slowly breathe out. Diaphragmatic breathing is how you want to breathe when you're speaking. So you have got your focus on the candle, you've got your calming meditation, and you have your public speaker breathing all starting. So doing that is a really, really powerful way to calm yourself down and also get yourself ready for any kind of public speaking kind of engagement, or even just in a meeting, to be able to really control how you're speaking and your breath. And as I said, sitting down isn't ideal for it. And I have a little paddleboarding injury, bruised rib at the moment. So my breathing isn't great today, and I'm very conscious of it on the webinar, that anything that kind of affects your breathing can affect how you're speaking. So bruised ribs aren't helpful, but I would recommend you try that. And it's a great way to calm down at any point. You can just nip into the toilet before a meeting or something like that and do that, and you'll feel so much calmer. 1 or 2 minutes, you don't need 30 seconds, even if you only have it. The other thing that's great if you feel nervous and like to feel a bit more powerful is a power pose. And some of you may have already heard of Amy Cuddy, who did a TED talk on them. And if you want to Google Amy Cuddy and watch her TED talk, I'd really recommend it. So she spoke a lot about body language. And we all kind of know certain kind of things we see with body language. You know, some people, there's that kind of really cliched like executive with their hands behind their head and their feet up on the desk. That's a power pose because they're saying, I'm in charge here and I don't care, you know. But this power pose is another one you can kind of nip into the loo and do and work to calm yourself and also make yourself feel empowered. So the power pose Amy Cuddy talks about is a Wonder Woman pose where you're standing with your feet about hip distance or a little bit wider than hip distance apart for that extra kind of impact. Hands on your hips, chest really puffed out, head held up high, and do that power pose, breathing deeply for a couple of minutes. And it can really make you feel quite energized and strong. And that's a great way to feel before you go into a meeting that you're nervous about. So I'd highly recommend that one as well. And again, with all of these things, it's really important to breathe through your nose because mouth breathing is panic breathing. And I'm sure if any of you are runners, you'll know this, that it's much more effective to breathe through your nose because mouth breathing actually does send your body into a little bit of that panicky mode. It's like, it's what we do when we're kind of overexerted or panicked. So if you go into that meeting and you're still feeling nervous, the other thing I would recommend is just, this can be, you know, on Zoom or in real life, is just to put your hand in your lap and just go along that line there and just touch on the acupressure points there. And also down along here, there's a little one in your thumb and the pad of your thumb. And if you kind of feel somewhere that you can feel a little twingy, you've probably got it. So you can sit just doing that on your lap to calm yourself. And it'll help as well if you're having that kind of, I'm dreading my turn to speak moment in a meeting. Now, the next one is about your presence in a meeting. So I'm going to talk about real life and Zoom on this one. And the first thing is how you sit. So I suppose if we're on a Zoom call like this, the camera placement is also important. And you don't want your camera up too high, you don't want it down low, so it's giving you 75 chins. And it's always good to have it at eye level because just in terms of how people perceive your credibility, when they take those nonverbal cues, someone looking straight at them is much more effective than someone giving them side eye or someone kind of looking at them up or down. Because if you look down at people, they take it as a sign of arrogance. And if you look up at people or you have your chin down, it can look submissive. So if you want to come across as confident in a meeting, it's really best to be straight on. And that's particularly for Zoom. Also, I think one trick I've learned, and this is what not to do, but it may help some people in a meeting, is that if you're actually very close to the screen and your head is appearing really large, that can be threatening. So if you want to have a little bit more impact maybe in a meeting and you're feeling nervous, actually maybe going a little bit closer to the camera might, to the other people in the meeting, make your presence a little bit more powerful. But I would recommend just sitting with a little bit of background around you and being straight on, because it's easier for people to watch as well. And I think Zoom fatigue is a very big thing where our brains are just trying to process all the different people. We can't pick up those nonverbal cues we'd get in a real life situation. So it can be quite tiring to watch or to be in a 2 or 3 hour Zoom meeting. And I think for a lot of people, that's why they've started, you know, turning their cameras off and just turning it on when you're speaking. Little things like that can just make it all a little bit less tiring. The other thing then for real life meetings is that where you sit can be very important. So if you're going back into the office and you actually are going into real life meetings again, whenever that might happen, the power position is the head of the table, obviously. So if you're the boss, sit there. If you're someone who wants to be close to the boss, the next best place is either side of them, because you kind of got their ear. The lowest power position in a meeting is bang in the middle of the table, where you're not as visible. So it's harder for other people to see you when you're speaking. So if you want to kind of push a point across in a meeting or make a little bit more impact, if you can get an end of the table, great, because the other end opposite the boss is also good, or somewhere at an end of the table. Now, if you have kind of something that you want to raise or present, it's great to be at the opposite end as well. And the other thing about how you sit then is that it's very important to be sitting up straight. Obviously, this is all deportment stuff that your mother might have told you when you were a kid, but sitting up straight is very good. And some office chairs aren't exactly the best for sitting up straight. So if you need to, don't slump back into it, or don't go back into the very back of the seat if it's quite far back. You're probably not going to have a cushion under your arm going into your meeting, but if you're at home, you definitely can. So sit a little bit forward if you need to. Try and get your feet flat on the floor, and leave a little bit of space, maybe 6 to 8 inches between you and the desk. So it gives you what they call a gesture box for using your hands when you're speaking. Because if you're too close in, you're kind of over the table, then can look a little bit overeager. But if you're too far away, it looks maybe a little bit too relaxed. So just being conscious of how all of these things come across, that, you know, we don't even notice we're doing these things, but other people are taking up nonverbal cues from them. So the next thing then I want to talk to you about is thinking on your feet, because this does help a little bit with that most common thing that people have come to me about, which is sitting in a meeting dreading their turn to speak. So one thing I'd hugely recommend if anyone feels like that is, if you can't go to a Speak Up Club workshop, of course, is to go to an improv acting class. And I think that they seem like a kind of fun thing to do as well. And I've done one myself recently enough, and there are certain games you can play in a class like this that you think they're just silly games, but they can have quite a powerful effect in building up your confidence in thinking on your feet. So there were things that I would have done in improv acting classes that were like a story circle, where it could have been 20 of us sitting around in a circle, and I would say one word, the next person would say the next word, and so on until we got around the circle telling a story. And you can add the number of words upwards and upwards. So it could be a sentence and the next person does a sentence. So if you have kids at home or something, this is a great one to play with them, but actually you're using it as training for yourself. And it's fun and silly, but it gets you used to just thinking without worrying too much or overanalyzing what you're thinking. The next kind of version of that is the yes and game, which is sort of similar, but it's a partner pair thing. So I would say something like, we should go on a picnic, and the next person would go, yes, and we should go up a mountain and take bicycles, or whatever. It doesn't really matter. You just keep going, yes, and. So you're responding with enthusiasm and building on the idea, which is a great little exercise. If any of you are kind of in companies or startups yourselves, you know, you can start with a nonsense topic, or you can start with a work-related topic, but it's a great exercise to respond with enthusiasm, build on the idea, think of a new thing. However crazy the idea is, it can be a really fun innovation game for companies as well as a really good improv game for thinking on your feet. So it's a double winner on that one. And the next improv thing I would get people to do in training is a mystery topic. So mystery topic could be something as simple as something you know really well yourself, like my first haircut, my first car, my dog, anything like that. And you just have to set a timer and talk for 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, however long is going to be a little bit of challenge and get you out of your comfort zone. I would recommend starting with 2 minutes for most people who have a relative level of comfort with that. Then as you get a more kind of accomplished or fearless public speaker, you can push that mystery topic into areas that are more headlines from today's newspaper, current affairs topics, business topics, whatever it is. But getting used to just being thrown a topic and having to talk about it for 2 minutes, it's like your brain is a muscle and it will get used to doing this. And so anytime you get put on the spot, you're just more used to thinking fast and not overanalyzing or kind of filtering yourself about what you're going to say. Now, hopefully I've flew through all of those in time enough to get to this last bit, which I think is really good things for meetings. So one thing I would say in meetings, and I know probably a lot of ladies on the webinar today, is that if you feel like you're not getting heard in meetings, and this works for men too, is have a buddy system before you go in, and have a promise made to each other that you will amplify each other's voices. So it has been kind of noticed, I think, both anecdotally and in studies, that often in meetings, women will say something, no one takes any notice, 5 minutes later, a man says the same thing and people hear it. So men's voices are deeper, they're actually hourly easier to hear anyway, but if you don't say things loud enough with confidence and nobody else picks it up in the moment, they will get lost. But someone might have sort of half heard it, it seeped in, and then they say it a minute later thinking it was their idea because they know they've heard it somewhere recently. So what you want to do is have an agreement with someone else if you're going into a meeting that you'll amplify each other. So that if you say something great, maybe it's something you've agreed you want to talk about in the meeting, or if it's a new idea that comes to mind during the meeting, your buddy is going to pick up on it immediately because they're going to be listening carefully to everything you say, and they'll be like, oh, great idea. I think that's a great idea about this thing they just said. So that everything you say gets repeated and someone is saying, great idea about it. And then you do that for each other, and nobody's ever going to miss your great ideas again. The other final thing then is the getting what you want in a meeting system. And when I did this in a training, I honestly didn't believe it was going to work. And unfortunately, we won't be able to do this today to prove it to all of you, but it astounded me. So I thought that there's no way this is going to work. And I was actually given the role in the kind of role play of the person who was getting what they want in the meeting. So everyone was given a little piece of paper with something in it, and then we had a fake meeting. And my thing was, you're going to get what you want. So what I had to do, I was taken aside and told how to get what I want. And then we did the fake meeting. Or we were all told how to do it. And then, actually, were we? I don't remember now. Anyway, point is, I got what I wanted. So in the fake meeting, I had to just agree with everything everyone else said and be a very positive person to get people on my side. So if someone else brought up an idea, I'd be like, oh, great idea, really good, yeah, I'd go for that. I think the thing that we were discussing was where we were going to go on our staff Christmas party. So if someone suggested a bar, I'd say, yeah, nice bar, I've been there, lovely. And so on and so forth. And then eventually, when it had kind of got down to the last 2 or 3 people arguing the toss between 1 or 2 things, just at the end of the meeting, after making everyone think I'm the loveliest person at the meeting by agreeing with all of them, I casually drop in, oh, what about this place that I want to go? And suddenly, everyone agrees with me. And after spending 20 minutes arguing the toss between 2 or 3 other places, everyone just agrees with my place. So that is worth trying for all of you, and astoundingly easy and astoundingly works. And I hope that it is effective for some of you. So that is a very rushed whistle-stop through this, and I hope it's been useful for some of you. I'm going to send the slides around to the ladies at Iconic, Michelle and Christine, and they can pass them on to you if you'd like them. My contact details are on them as well. So if anyone wants to get in touch, I will be running Speak Up Club webinars online, and also I'm available for one-on-one coaching if anybody wants that either. And I'm very happy to take questions now if anyone has some. The other thing is that if anyone has a question they want to ask anonymously, you can just direct message me as well. And I have a question saying, is there such a thing as using your hands too much? Yeah, I hope I wasn't. That wasn't a pointed question. Definitely, if it's distracting, yeah, it can be. So I think the thing is, once it's natural, I think it's fine. But if you, I mean, certainly on Zoom, if they're getting in the way of your face, then that's going to be a problem. Thanks. So no, I wasn't. But yeah, I think that what I would kind of encourage people to do when I'm doing public speaking training with them is that the first thing we try and get to is a place of stillness, so that your core body is like a very firm T, your back is like an iron rod, your shoulders are straight. And we're trying to and no kind of bobbleheading like this. So once we get a firm stance, feet planted into the ground, I also do kind of grounding visualization thing as well, which really helps people feel kind of in place. And so first of all, we'd work on not moving around too much. You know, if you're on a stage doing a presentation, I'd try and encourage people not to pace about until they're at the point where you can use your movement to kind of convey a message. So it might be a message of, I'm moving across here to show the passage of time, or I'm moving across here to show a new idea. But at first, I would say work on stillness and a really firm posture. And then if you're kind of freaked out about what to do with your hands, which a lot of people are, and I always kind of joke, we have these weird things attached to our bodies that never bother us until we have to get up and speak in front of other people. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, what do I do with them? So I'd say at first, just let them hang until it feels natural. And as you become more confident, what happens is that you stop thinking so much about how you're doing what you're doing, because it starts to become more natural. And then you just think about the message that you're getting across. And once you start getting into the message, then you stop thinking about the logistics of your body and how it's working, because it's kind of become natural. And then your hands will just do what your hands do, you know, which they do 24 hours a day, all the rest of the time anyway. So thank you, Leanne, for that question. Do I have any suggestion of what to do when you're in the middle of a meeting and speaking and lose your train of thought, and how can you get back on track? Yes, I do, because I am the worst person in the world for losing my train of thought. So I wouldn't say I'm perfect, but I know how to help other people because I suffer from all the problems myself. And I would say that, you know, the best thing you can do is acknowledge it, because I think that what I feel is I hate bluffers. So if, you know, when it comes to anything, I loved when Leo Varadkar was on TV and Ryan Tubridy asked him a question about something that had just come out that day, and he pulled the notes out of his pocket and checked them. I think it's better to be honest about stuff. So if you've lost your train of thought, you're not going to find it quickly enough without kind of stopping and saying it, because you could leave a dramatic pause, of course, but if the dramatic pause doesn't do it, I think it's better to say, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought there. I mean, if you have notes, just say, I'm just going to check my notes and get back to what we were on, or make a joke of it and say, were you guys listening? Can anyone tell me what I was talking about? If the worst case scenario, if you really can't think of what you were saying. But I would say it's always better to be honest. And if you don't know a piece of information as well, that's what I was saying, that example of Leo Varadkar on the Late Late Show, was that he was asked something about, you know, some COVID things that had literally just come out that day. And then he's on the show that night. So he hasn't had time to memorize all of the facts and figures that day. And he pulls out the notes and says, here is the exact figure that you wanted. And it's better to do that than bluff people or give them the wrong information. And if you're ever at a kind of meeting or public speaking or whatever it is, I would say use it as an opportunity. If someone asks a question you don't have the answer to right there, especially if you work in sales, rather than feeling like they think you don't know what you're doing, say, I want to get back to you with the exact figures on that. I want to give you the exact information you need. So give me your email and I will get back to you. And then you've created a contact, and that you have their contact details, and you can get back to them with as much information as possible, and give them more than just a kind of a fob off answer, and create a connection with someone. So I'd highly advise just being honest about it. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming today. Thank you for giving up your lunch hour for this, and I hope it's been helpful. I've tried to squash in as many helpful things as I could in the half an hour. And if you want any more information, I'm happy to chat to anyone. Just drop me a line. And on the website, there are some articles and things like that. And also, if I go back to here, you can follow on any social media that you like. There are some videos in my Instagram highlights, which have some tips. There are some TikToks that have some tips. And again, I'll be just, sign up to the newsletter if you want to any information on further things that are happening. And I will be back in another couple of weeks with Iconic with another webinar on how to sit powerfully, which we touched on today. I'll be doing a little more in depth the next time. So thank you so much for that, everyone.